10 Sports Central will be going over our next final prediction of this offseason, and it will be over the Indiana Hoosiers. And this is a team that was 8-5 in 2019. All around a great season for Indiana. They were a big surprise to many people, including myself. I did not expect Indiana to be as good as they were. But whether or not this team can make it further than 8 wins in 2020, and whether or not this team is a Big Ten dark horse in 2020, is what we're going over here today. We're going to be going over your returning production along with a full preview and prediction on every game on Indiana's schedule heading into 2020. And so with that being said, let's look at your season trends from 2019 for this team. Once again, they were 8-5 overall, and then they were 6-2 between September and October, and then 2-3 between November and the postseason. So this is a very consistent team all season long, going 6-2 between September and October. That was very impressive in general to see them clinch a bowl game all the way before the final month of the regular season. And of course, once again, they did have a bit of a drop off between November and the postseason, but still, I mean, the schedule got much tougher going into November, and they still were able to have a good season otherwise, getting up to 8 wins. So still, it was just all around a great season for Indiana. And yeah, some of your great wins from last season: you beat Nebraska, of course, on the road, 38-31, big win there. Of course, Nebraska looked like they were going to win it there for quite a while in that one. At Northwestern, they also had to win against them, 34-3. Then they beat Purdue in 2 overtimes. Very close game there, 44-41. But Indiana got the win in the end. So lots of great wins for Indiana last season. I mean, those were just 3 of them. I mean, this team was able to make it to 8 wins last season, which is something that Indiana usually is not able to do. I mean, they're more of a basketball school, so to see them do well in football, and I expect that to continue into 2020, is kind of surprising, but at the same time, I mean, it's good for Indiana in general for sure. As far as the returning production goes, your starting quarterback Peyton Ramsey is transferring away, and it looks like your second quarterback in Michael Penix is going to be taking over for 2020. And honestly, I mean, Peyton Ramsey, the main reason why he's even transferring away from Indiana for the 2020 season is because of how much potential Michael Penix has. I mean, we did not see Michael Penix for a good chunk of last season, but when he did play, he was very impressive. He put up 1,400 yards in the time that he did play last season with 10 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. And yeah, he also had a 69% completion rate, so he had a great percentage of completion. So he's a very accurate quarterback last season in general. Now, much better than Peyton Ramsey was. Of course, Peyton Ramsey last season was able to put up more yardage, as he had 2,500 yards with 13 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, along with a 68% completion rate. But still, I mean, Michael Penix, in the time frame that he only played for him to put up 1,400 yards was very impressive. And I think next season, he is a quarterback to watch out for. No one's really talking about him. I've not heard his name hardly ever this offseason, and it's really surprised me because, I mean, I think he's a quarterback that definitely needs to be talked about. I think he could definitely be a top 3 or 4 quarterback in the Big Ten next season. I mean, if you watched my Big Ten quarterback ranking video, I think I had Michael Penix in there quite high. I mean, he's a quarterback that definitely needs to be watched out for going into the 2020 season. And once again, the main reason, I mean, Peyton Ramsey is a great quarterback as well, but the main reason why he even transferred away in the first place is because of how much upside Michael Penix has. I mean, for him, once again, he didn't even hardly plan on starting last season, but in the time that he did play last season, he was a very promising quarterback. So watch out for him for sure going into 2020. As far as the running back core goes, you return your top running back in Stevie Scott, which he was the biggest running back of this team. Of course, he had 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns last season. And other than that, I mean, they did not have another main running back in there. They did have a couple of receivers, of course, with their top receiver, Wap, coming back. And, of course, last season, he was a big wide receiver for this team, having a lot of yards. He had over 1,000 yards with 5 touchdowns last season. So he was a big part of this team. That's going to be a big return for Indiana in general. And yeah, that's going to help out Michael Penix for sure as well, to be able to have your top receiver back. And they also bring in their tight end, or they return your tight end, Peyton Hendershot. And, of course, he had 618 yards last season, as well as 4 touchdowns. So you can't forget about him as well. They also return their second wide receiver, Ty. He's coming back, 600 yards with 3 touchdowns. And then you also lose your third wide receiver, Nick Westbrook. But even though you're losing your third receiver, you still do return your top 3 in receiving from last season. Of course, with those 3 receivers. And I mean, overall, I mean, all 3 of them really had big parts of this team last season. I mean, especially with Wap having over 1,000 yards with 5 touchdowns. So, I mean, overall, this Indiana team is looking very good, especially on the offensive side. And I think Michael Penix, once again, I talked about him before. I think he's a quarterback that you really got to be watching out for. He's got a lot of potential, a lot of upside. Got to watch out for him for sure. And once again, as I said before, I think he's definitely a quarterback that could be top 3 or 4 quarterback in the Big Ten next season. As far as the offensive line goes, though, you do lose 2 on there. You lose 2 linebackers as well as 1 in the secondary. So, yeah, you do lose 3 in the defense. So, I mean, that's not bad at all. But in the end, that offensive line is probably, I'd say, my biggest concern on this team, and that's not even that bad. I mean, most teams lose at least 2 offensive linemen. So for Indiana, that really is not all that bad. But in the end, the big question is Michael Penix underrated? I would say he definitely is. I mean, once again, as I said before, he is not really talked about by anyone. And so I think he's a quarterback you got to watch out for. But you also have another question, chances of a 9+ win season in 2020. I think it's definitely possible. I mean, for Indiana next season, the only problem that I have with them is that their schedule is going to be brutal next season. Of course, they're in a really tough division. I'd say they're in probably one of the best divisions in all of college football right now. I mean, when you're in the Big Ten East, you've got Michigan in there, you've got Ohio State, you got Penn State, so you already got 3 big time colleges there, and then of course Indiana has to be thrown into that mix. So, I mean, for me to say that Indiana is going to beat out Ohio State, I don't think that's going to happen by a long shot. I think Ohio State in the end has got a lot more talent than this Indiana team does. I think everyone can agree on that. But Indiana in the end, I still think is a team that could do a lot of damage in the Big Ten and in the college football world in general. I think that they definitely could pull some big upsets next season. And I think Indiana is a team that could really sneak up on some people. You can't forget about them for sure. I mean, especially with Michael Penix under center. I mean, if he stays healthy, watch out for this Indiana team for sure. As far as your schedule goes, though, you start off the season on September 4th against Wisconsin. That's going to be a road game. And as much as I think that Indiana is going to hang around in that game, I think Wisconsin gets the win in the end. I just think it's going to be too tough having to go on the road on the first game of the season and playing at Wisconsin in a very tough place to play. And, of course, Camp Randall. And, of course, Wisconsin next season is another team that I expect to be one of the best in the nation. They're probably my early favorite, I would say, to win the Big Ten West as well. So, yeah, Wisconsin with Jack Cohn, they're looking really good this season. I think Wisconsin does get the first win of the season for the Indiana schedule. But as far as the rest of the September goes, I think you get 3 pretty easy wins against Western Kentucky, Ball State, and then UConn. I think all 3 of those games are going to be pretty easy. So you go into your October with a 3-1 record, looking pretty good. Then in your October, you do not have a bye week. I do not. Actually, you do. You do on the first week of October. And then you've got 4 straight games there. You got Maryland, Rutgers, Michigan State, and Penn State. So I think you get easy wins over Maryland and Rutgers. Both of those games should be pretty easy for Indiana. But your Michigan State game, that one's going to be close. I think Michigan State kind of sneaks up on Indiana, but Indiana does get the win in the end there, I think. With that Penn State game, I mean, I went back and forth on that. I think Indiana could definitely make a case to pull a possible upset in that Penn State game. With it being at home, and Indiana sometimes has been a tricky place for some schools, for some big-name college football teams to play in. I think Indiana could give Penn State some trouble in that game, but I think Penn State gets the win in the end. So overall, I mean, still going into your November, you got a 6-2 record, and that is not bad at all. You've already clinched bowl eligibility, and the only thing that you're looking for in your November, I'd assume, is just as to whether or not you can get any higher than that. And I mean, as far as your November looks, I mean, you got Ohio State on the road, of course, to start it off with, and then you got Illinois, Michigan, and Purdue. And I think, of course, Ohio State and Michigan, both teams like that, I think should both be at least 9-win teams. I mean, Ohio State on the other end, I expect them to go like 11-1 probably. So, I mean, Ohio State's going to be out of the ordinary next season, but that Michigan game could be tough as well. And here's what I'm expecting. I'll give you 2-2 in the November month. I do think you two take a loss against Ohio State and Michigan. I mean, I kind of went back and forth on the Michigan game especially. I mean, I'm pretty confident that you'll lose to Ohio State, though. I mean, with it coming after that Penn State game, I think that's already going to be a tough game. I mean, the schedule does not set up right for Indiana to be able to get a win in Columbus. And so I think Ohio State gets the win there on November 7th. But I do think you come back the next week and get a win against Illinois pretty easily. So you go into that Michigan game with, I believe, a 7-3 record, which really is not all that bad. But I do believe you take a loss against Michigan. And I think Michigan's got too good of a home field advantage for me to believe that Indiana can get a win there, at least for this season. I think next season, especially if Michael Penix, I mean, this team could definitely, I mean, they've got some pretty good years coming up, with 2020 being one of them. But yeah, I think you get a win against Purdue as well pretty easily at home on November 28th. So you finish off your season with an 8-4 record. Really not all that bad for Indiana. That also sets up a potential 9-win season, of course, if you win your bowl game, which that would be a huge achievement for Indiana. I think it's been quite a while since this team's made it to even 9 wins. That would be quite an achievement for Indiana. I think it's definitely possible next season that this team is able to make a run for 9 wins. I mean, once again, I mean, you got to get a big upset in order to get up to 10 wins, but I think it's definitely possible that Indiana does get up to 9 wins next season, which once again would be a huge achievement for Indiana in general. But anyway, with that, let me know your thoughts and comments below on Indiana. If you enjoyed this preview, be sure to slap a like on it and subscribe as well. It really helps out the channel, and really appreciate that. But as always, thanks again for watching. Let me know your thoughts on Indiana. Let me know your record predictions as well as your score predictions. I'd like to hear all of that. But yeah, once again, thanks again for watching. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central, and I will see you all later.